Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Mess. So today we're going to continue the series on the MARS FPGA project, and they have announced a lot more stuff on Twitter, or at least we assume they have, because they've been tweeting out different track sequences from different arcade games that one could assume they are announcing for MARS FPGA. And this is after their Twitter got a little bit quiet in the last couple of weeks after they talked about going to too many games in Philadelphia in July. But let's talk about everything that MARS has teased out, what platforms they run on, the hardware, and what that could potentially mean for the project in and of itself. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, down below hit like and subscribe and all that jazz. The first thing you're going to see here is they have tweeted the track sequence to Amazinger Z. This is a Tate or vertical shmup running on the Cave 68000 hardware, and that's going to become important as to why in just a moment. But this is one of those shmups. I feel like a lot of people maybe have never played it before. It isn't as synonymous with the other games that obviously run on the Cave 68000 core, and that's because most of those games are developed by Cave themselves, one of the best makers of bullet hell shmups in the game. But you'll see here right when you get in, it's got a nice look to it, and it is a fun B-tier shmup in my opinion. It doesn't raise to the level of something like a Cave game or some of the other vertical shmups that can run on arcade boards, but it is a fun time, and if you're into the whole superhero aesthetic with the gigantic mechs, then you're definitely going to take more out of this. For me, it's definitely one of those B-tier games. I played it, I enjoy it, but I kind of forgot about it until I saw the Mars tweet. But it is a very pretty game, and that's because it does run on that Motorola 68000 Cave PCB, and of course Cave would always make some good hardware to go along with their shmups. But the reason I think this one is announced, and I'll talk about it right now, this runs on the 68000 hardware, and there are already cores available for that on the MiSTer FPGA side of things. Stuff like Gaia Crusaders has been running on MiSTer for maybe like 8 months or a year now, and this is an awesome beat 'em up if you've never played it. I can't recommend it enough. It's absolutely absurd and very creative in what it does, and it's kind of loosely tied to the Power Instinct fighting game series. So the fact that this works on MiSTer FPGA, bringing over something like a core like this to the potential Mars product would be a pretty easy pivot, because the core already exists. A lot of the code underlying how it would work is already there. It is just a different game on the same hardware, but do be aware that sometimes arcade boards in the same family can have slight hardware variations. It's not unheard of at all to have a board of the same generation have a slight design change to it. I'm not sure if that's the case here. I'd have to look into the hardware more, but it has been teased out. Now moving over to WWF WrestleFest, this is another one that the Mars team retweeted after Attract 17 tweeted it, so we should probably assume that Mars is looking into it as well. And this is a fun game. It's one of the deeper cut wrestling games, but honestly, anything that has the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase in it, I am going to be a fan of, because back in the day as a kid, he was definitely my #1 favorite wrestler, right behind Ric Flair, because no one can beat Ric Flair, to be honest with you. Now this one is a ton of fun. It definitely has that classic look to it, with those sort of deformed characters being a little bit bigger than real life, but the Royal Rumble mode has always been one of my favorites. It's just pure controlled chaos in that fun arcade way everyone knows, loves, and remembers. And tell me down below if you played this game back in the day. I remember my local arcade having a PCB for this on the floor, and I absolutely played the ever-loving hell out of it, so it seems like another thing that the Mars team is talking about bringing over to the board. But of course we're going to have to wait until July apparently to see the board in action again. I have heard that it has been redesigned and there's going to be some changes on it, but we'll have to wait for the Mars team to show anything like that, because anything else would just be presumptive at this point in time. But honestly, this would be a fun board to get as far as an FPGA core is concerned. It's not one I have in my collection, and now watching the footage I'm wondering why I've never actually picked this one up, because it is a lot of fun. And you can see there at the top it does have 4-player support as well, so that would be great for like a party night. Obviously doing it on FPGA would be easier than trying to wire 4 different controls into an arcade board, but I love doing things on hard mode, so maybe I will actually look into picking one of these up after I'm done with the voiceover, because it is one of those games. It's a classic, and now it seems to be one that the Mars team is teasing about potentially bringing over to the board. I'm not sure if this is what people are going to want, but I definitely would be into it. But tell me down below what's the one game so far you would want to see. Now Pramod has shown off more NARC as well. I'm not sure if this is talking about MiSTer or Mars, but he did tweet out this video here and somebody sent it to me, and this is basically showing the NARC actual graphics. It's still having a little bit of an issue, but it is showing more on screen. Now this is definitely one of those love it or hate it games. NARC is mostly spectacle. The gameplay loop is decent, if not great, but this was still that era where Midway was just basically trying to throw as much spectacle and gore on screen as possible just to get your quarters. And that's not a bad thing. That's how they the original Mortal Kombat ended up being successful, because you'll see there, when we actually shoot off that rocket launcher, limbs just go flying into the sky, spinning around. It is definitely a fun look, and I love that a lot of these guys, especially in later levels, throw syringes at you as attacks. And this makes perfect sense that they're working on this more, because the MARS team has said they're bringing Mortal Kombat 2 to Mars. And if you're not familiar with the arcade hardware from NARC to Mortal Kombat 2, they are actually very similar. We'll go over the specs in just a moment, but I know a lot of people are interested in Mortal Kombat 2. I can't say it's my favorite fighting game franchise of all time, but I get why people want to see an FPGA core here. Now, if you take a look at the specs of the Williams Z unit hardware, you're going to see the main CPU, the sound CPU, and the sound chips listed on System 16. And once we go over to the T unit hardware, keep those specs in mind, because you're going to see something very similar. This is the hardware that NARC runs on that Z unit, and it only runs NARC, and that's not really surprising. When developers of arcade hardware put out new boards, sometimes they'll make a slight revision, moving it into a new generation, so you'll end up in a situation where there's only one game running on it. Now, if we take a look at the T unit hardware, you're going to see extremely similar specs, and you're going to see the original Mortal Kombat as well as Mortal Kombat 2. So it makes sense that when they talk about bringing Mortal Kombat 2 to Mars, having that Z unit with NARC working is going to be fundamental work on actually getting that to function, because it is just a derivative of the hardware that Mortal Kombat 2 would use, and a lot of time arcade manufacturers and developers like to recycle old hardware to get more out of it into the future. So it looks like NARC is still in process. I'm never sure if it's going to be updated on MiSTer. We will have to wait and see. And this goes along with all of the other arcade games that the MARS team has put up a track sequences or commercials for. There's so many different titles they've been talking about, but they never actually put any text to those, so maybe they're just posting their favorite games of all time, and maybe none of this is intended for Mars. It really is hard to tell. They've talked about Sailor Moon as well back in 2023, and this is one that I've talked about on the channel. It's definitely an awesome deep cut hidden gem beat 'em up, and I would actually like to see an FPGA core for this as well. It is just a classic game that I feel like not as many people have played as should have. They've also teased stuff like Night Slashers, one of my favorite beat 'em ups of all time, and if you actually want to buy an arcade board for this game, you've got to bring your wallet, because we're talking about mortgage rate prices. And they've shown Beast Busters as well. I'm trying to kind of basically comprise what they've teased so far and what might possibly be showing up on Mars when they exhibit the hardware next, because they have teased dozens upon dozens of games, consoles, as well as different arcade cores. So the question kind of is, what's going to show up next? Because when they were actually down in Florida, we saw one game running on the FPGA chip and the board itself. So it's kind of the question on everyone's minds, what are they going to show next? And there's so many different things they've teased. Tell me down below, what's the one game you'd want to play out of any other of them? You'll also see they're talking about the Midway DCS sound system within a track sequence right here as well. See if you can guess the game. It'll be a little bit fun. It is a Midway Sports exclusive, and that should definitely help you up. This is another thing that they are teasing on MARS FPGA, and that's kind of where they're at right now. They're still teasing out all of these things, like the 3DO core as well, putting up commercials, basically telling you without telling you that this is what's coming to Mars, and it's what you should expect. So any of these things could be previewed in July, and I think most people are looking to see multiple things running on the board. That way they can get a better sense of where the development is at. They've even teased Atari Jaguar, a system that definitely has a couple of games worth playing on it, so maybe it'll be Jaguar you're playing in July. That really is the question. When is it going to be seen next, and what is it going to be running? And we obviously don't know yet, but when I do know something more, I'll make another video. But you guys keep asking about Mars, and considering that they have been showing more stuff on Twitter lately, it is more fun and easy to talk about it. But we will have to wait and see what comes next. If they start updating some of the tweets with more games, I'll definitely do a video. If they start showing off more hardware, we will talk about that as well, because I really haven't seen the Mars hardware since Florida, and like I said, I heard it's gone under a design revision, so we'll have to see what comes out of the back end of that. But that's the current Mars news. You guys seem to be interested, so I'll keep making the videos, but hope you had a good ham and liquor party yesterday, and I'll see you guys for the next Mars video next time. Bye bye.